You're listening to the Raptors 905 podcast. I'm Savanna Hamilton alongside Charles Kissy. Charles, who do we got today?
We have Shelby Weaver, Nova Scotia's own Director of Basketball Advancement for the Toronto Raptors. She's going to share that journey with us and talk a little bit about her businesses, where she's at, the two Raptors championships, all of the above. Let's welcome Shelby to the show.
Shelby Weaver is a Director of Basketball Advancement at the Toronto Raptors, and now she's joining us, of course, here on the Raptors 905 podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys?
I'm good. Charles, I don't know what Charles. He's always a little...
Always good, and happy to be spending some time with you, Shelby. Welcome back from Tampa. How's it been? How does it feel to be home?
It feels amazing to be home. I know, probably people who've been here through the whole pandemic maybe don't feel the same way, but it's really nice to be home. I don't think I realized how much I was going to miss the city, and it's just nice to be back. I'm taking joy in a lot of little things. Like every day I go for a walk and I'm like, this was the best walk ever. Like I'm having the best day. But it's been hard times for everybody, but happy to be home.
I mean, you timed it perfectly. You just came back from a season with the Raptors in Florida, and obviously Florida weather is amazing. All the snowbirds go down there.
Yep.
But then now you're back here in the summertime Toronto ting. Let's go.
I know.
You got it all planned out.
Listen, best of both worlds at this point from a weather standpoint. It's been good. I feel like the minute I got home, it was nice. So I was like, oh, maybe I brought this with us.
Exactly. You should stay here for a little longer before next season starts. Let's just start from the beginning. Honestly, I think that you are one of those faces that are very familiar. We hear articles, we read articles about you and see your face around, but I want to get to really know you and your involvement, not just with MLSE, but of course the Raptors 905, because it's very embedded within the two. So take us back to the beginning. How did you enter MLSE here?
Man, it honestly, whenever I talk about this, it feels very recent, but I've been in Toronto now for 10 years, and I started my career 10 years ago, which is so insane. But yeah, I moved to Toronto from Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's where I grew up. I went to St. Francis Xavier University, did a degree in finance there, which is I'm clearly putting my degree to very good use, as most of us are. Started to, I played basketball growing up. Basketball was a huge part of my life, huge part of who I was as an athlete. And my basketball career ended sooner than I would have liked due to some health issues. And it caused me to have to figure out who I was without basketball very early on, when I was in university. And that was a really difficult transition for me. I can only imagine what it's like when you're a professional or when you played, 4 or 5 years of college ball. It was a really, really hard transition. Yes, I was a good student. Yes, I was a community volunteer. I did all these other things, but how I really identified was as an athlete. And that was a really important part about how I saw myself as unique. And losing that was a really interesting experience. But it pushed me to figure out what I wanted to do in my life a lot sooner. And I actually think in the long run, it really helped me. And so my 4th year of university, I decided I wanted to work in sports. Getting back to basketball was really important to me. I was really interested in business, and that felt like the right path for me. So I made a decision to move to Toronto, when I graduated. So I moved 3 days after my graduation ceremony and cut a deal with my parents that they would pay my rent for 1 month in Toronto while I tried to find a job in sports. And then if I didn't, I would just have to get whatever kind of job to pay the bills, because I was going to get cut off. So, that's the deal I made. And I don't want to make it sound too incredible. I spent my whole 4th year, really grinding it out and trying to meet people. I went to Toronto for reading weeks, had coffees with all kinds of different people. I did some wild things like dropping off my resume with a box of donuts with my resume taped to the top, all kinds of things to try to get my foot in the door somewhere. And about a month in, I got a job at MLSE as an administrative assistant, which is basically a secretary. And, but I lucked out. I was working for a guy by the name of Dave Hopkinson, who, I'm sure many people have heard of in the sports business world. He's now an executive vice president at MSG, but he was at MLSE for a very long time. And that sort of started my career, and he was an incredible resource to me. I didn't do a lot of secretary type things, which was amazing. He really helped bring me up through the business, taught me everything, showed me everything that he was doing, as opposed to just having me do work. He would like really walk me through all of the steps and all of the things that went into his job as a vice president, and then ultimately as a chief commercial officer of MLSE. And so it was like this incredible, like felt like a master's in sports business, to be honest. And that kind of like launched my career into sports from there. And, you know, then I bounced around all kinds of other different jobs at MLSE and ultimately landed in basketball.
So I love this because I think everyone who's listening production wise is happy because Halifax was mentioned. So shout out to everyone on the East Coast listening.
Shout out Halifax.
I know they're excited. That's a big step. Like that's a risk. You know, we're going to get into Freddie and all that in a minute, talking about betting on yourself.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because there's not a lot of people. It's fair. Like when we talk about sport, professional sport, everything is centered around the GTA and Toronto typically, right? You recognize that early. How did you sort of make that, you know, transition? Like that's a big jump.
Yeah, it was a big jump for me. And honestly, it was a hard jump. Like you know, as much as my identity was also tied up in being an athlete, my identity was tied up with being an athlete in Halifax. So smaller city, you grow up there, people know you, your reputation precedes you. Like there's a certain level of comfort that comes with being in a city like that. And I had a lot of friends. I had an amazing support system. I had like everything there, to be frank. And, you know, but ultimately I didn't feel like I could pursue my career at a level that was going to make me happy. And, you know, I am very lucky and privileged to have had parents that supported, I would say, risk-taking. Like my parents were, you know, both of my parents, I think, were sort of funneled into certain career choices early on. Like my mom, for instance, she really wanted to be a flight attendant, but back when she was coming up, and she wanted to go to fashion school. Those are the two things she really wanted to do. But back then it was different times. Like take a government job, take a job with a pension, become a teacher, become a nurse. You know, there was all sort of these things that were more important at those times. And, you know, which is so amazing. My mom later went back and became a flight attendant, like in her, I was going to say her age, but she'd be very upset at me. But my mom later in her life, in the last 5 years, just changed her whole path and became a flight attendant. And like, I think that's so cool. And so, you know, my parents were very encouraging in me choosing my own path, and them supporting me in doing that, and allowing me to be really creative and entrepreneurial at a young age. And now, mind you, there was no misconceptions. Like it came with a lot of work. It came with high standards. Like this wasn't like, oh yeah, do whatever you want and we'll you know, we'll give you all the resources. It was like, no, if you want to do this, cool, we'll support you, but like understand that this is what it takes. And I grew up in a household where, you know, neither of my parents had anything given to them, and they built a really good life for themselves. So I think that was a huge reason why I did it. Let's not get it twisted. I was so homesick. I called home crying all the time. I wanted to move back. Like I was probably not emotionally ready to do what I did, but I did it and became a better person for it. But I was like very homesick. I had no friends here. I had one friend. Shout out to Yannick Walcott. He played Dalhousie men's basketball. He was from Toronto. He was my only friend in Toronto when I first moved here, and God love him. He was good to me. But I had nobody. And like, I remember like calling home on a Friday night one night. Like growing up, we used to order pizza on Fridays. Like that was just the thing we did in our house. And I was like, it was Friday. I was like, oh, this is when I was working. So, you know, I had a job at this point. I was like, oh, I'm going to order pizza. And so I like started looking at pizza places, and there was like so many options. And like, I didn't know where to order from, and I ordered from this pizza place, and it was terrible. And I called home, like bawling my eyes out, the stupidest thing in the world. But it was like, I felt so out of sorts all the time. Like just trying to get pizza felt like this like crazy, like experience that I couldn't wrap my head around. And like, so it was just like, it was a hard first year or two. My parents both said to me, like, stick it out for a year, like give it a year. And if you want to move home after a year, you can move home. And, you know, I stuck it out for a year, but by the time I got to the year, it was different. People started to move from Halifax. Like at that point, I was just really fast. Like I jumped the gun. I was like on it. So slowly I made friends and I started to build a life for myself here. But man, in the early days, I was like, oh, it was rough to say the least. It was rough emotionally and mentally.
As it would be, but you know, one, shout out to the rents. Like, you gotta love the parents for
100%.
not only supporting you, but you know, their sacrifices that they've made in their life to,
Yeah.
you know, help see you now have the opportunity to thrive
Yep.
and take so-called risks that really end up paying off. Hey, you got thrown in the fire, girl.
Listen.
But now here you are. Clearly the resumes and the donuts all worked. You made your way into MLSC.
I didn't get that job. Let's be clear. That was not my MLSC job. I'm sure someone probably is someone. I can't remember where it was, but I'm sure someone looks back at that and like sees my name somewhere. Like, isn't that the donut girl? Like,
they were all hoping that you would reapply just to get donuts weekly. I think
exactly.
that was
exactly.
kind of like your parents were saying, hey, just stick it out for a year, just enough time to renovate your room and switch it into something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Like, oh, you want to come home? Your room's actually a craft room now.
Yeah,
I was gonna say the office now. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I want to get into like how you got brought up in through MLSC. Now you talked about your mentor, but now you kind of made a name for yourself. When did that start happening? When did people start to recognize who Shelby Weaver was without your mentors?
You know, I would honestly, as a start, I would give credit to like my first couple bosses. Like I don't know how I got so lucky, because it wasn't by strategy, to be honest. Like I was taking whatever job I could get at the time and moving wherever I could move in the company. But my first 3 bosses at MLSE all really allowed me to own relationships, own projects, take on responsibility in a way that allowed me to be me and like show what I could do. And so Dave was the first one. I moved into the foundation for a very short stint for 8 months, and I worked for a person by the name of Christina Flynn, who is just like a wonderful person and a wonderful leader. And you know, also worked in the same department as Michael Bartlett, Dave DeFreitas, like just really incredible people. I then went back and worked for Dave for a second stint when Tim Lywicki came on board. And Tim was unbelievable to me too. And then when I moved over to 905, working for Dan Toltzman, who I believe you guys have had on the podcast already, like everybody just let me do my thing. And they walked such an incredible line between providing me with support when I needed it, but also allowing me to do things on my own. And that as a balance it's a really hard balance to achieve. Especially when there's like a lot on the line. And I just got really lucky. And there's a lot of luck in sports. We know that from when you're on the court to off the court. Like there's a lot of things, that preparation and hard work and all these things that goes into it, but you got to get a little lucky. And anybody that tells you there's no luck involved is lying to you. But through them empowering me to kind of go off and do everything kind of on my own, I was able to kind of show people who I was, show people what kind of work I did, and build my own relationships and build things my way and do things my way. And, you know, I think that's really what started it for me is I was, you know, when you work for someone like Dave and you work for Tim, like you're dealing with a lot of high level people. Like Hop was empowering me to have relationships with other female CMOs that would, like, you know, I would reach out to them directly for certain things to help him with stuff. And he allowed me to build those relationships on my own, as opposed to just, you know, booking the meeting and sitting quietly in the corner. And so I've always appreciated that about everybody that I've worked for up until this point. And that's been really impactful for me. And it gave me confidence when I probably wouldn't have been able to do that on my own in the early days of sports, because you're just trying to get your foot in the door. You think just like, be quiet, do good work, and stand in the corner. Like that's sort of the mentality that you have. And I had people who really pushed me to kind of build my own ways and my own relationships. And that was really helpful for me early on. And honestly, something that's probably been super formative to like my career and, you know, how I work now.
Hey, I was gonna say, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Isn't that?
Yeah, I believe that.
It's
sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah, it's definitely true. I think. So you've touched on so many pieces. I'm going to ask you the first one. You mentioned working with other high-level female executives. How important, and I know how you feel already, but just I would say sort of talk about how important it is for women, and to be honest, not only women, but to see you in this role and that representation, but for men to see you in this role and see the work that you do. How important is that? And then maybe talk a little bit about the work that you do on such a regular basis, empowering other people, because that's the theme. I mean, is what you're talking about right now is people empowered you to do your job, to build the confidence and the competencies and capacity, right?
Yeah.
And so you're passing that along, and how important is that for you?
I mean, I've said this so many times, but like representation is really so important. And that doesn't just go for women. It goes for Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, marginalized groups, people, members of the LGBTQ plus community. Like representation is just so important. And honestly, in the early days, there wasn't a ton of people, or it wasn't a ton of women in positions that I wanted, to be frank. Like I was looking at certain jobs. Okay, there were some women in these roles and other roles, but like the job that I wanted when I first started in sports, there was not women in that job. And I was in a very, let's call it stereotypical female role. I was an assistant. Like that's a very, I would say maybe a bit of a boxed in position when it comes to gender identity. And the more that I was like, even just like one connection to a female executive gave me like a little bit of juice and a little bit of hope. And like one of those was really impactful to me. And so as we've grown in sports, and as sports continues to evolve at a place that I think it needs to get to, I just think of like how impactful those ones were to me, and then like how that's going to impact now, like the all female broadcast. And Savanna, even you, Charles, like being a Black head coach, like that in itself is so powerful. And like a kid sitting in the stands watching you coach or watching you on a broadcast of it, it's like that one interaction, even if they've never met you or never get to talk to you, can change the trajectory of their life, can change what they think is possible. And that's just super important. Like it's so important. And I think the way that I see it, and maybe, maybe this is wishful thinking, but I believe that I'm kind of like built in a special way, in the sense of like, I feel like I can take on the burden of some of these, like, maybe beating down the bush of certain paths that aren't laid out. And then ultimately, I hope that doing what we do is going to make it easier for people to come behind us. And that's kind of like what motivates me. And, if I get frustrated about certain things, like there is a greater purpose here. And I think that I hope that what I'm doing is going to make it easier. I hope what you're doing, Savanna, is going to make it easier. I hope, Charles, what you're doing is going to make it easier for those that are going to come behind us. And that for me is like a big part because honestly, when I started working, like the amount of men that would reach out to me for informational coffees or to talk about what I was doing was crazy. Like they would shoot their shot all the time, and I would give my time to young people because people gave their time to me. So that's a really important part. But it was like, why aren't women reaching out? It's not because women don't want to work in sports. We just know that's not fundamentally true. It's not that women don't care about sports, but like, where was the disconnect between all of these men that felt confident to just like cold LinkedIn me or cold email me and ask for my time, but there wasn't women. And so I started kind of trying to meet people where they were and offer my time more to women and offer my time to people who maybe don't have those same paths or visible paths in the sports industry. And that's been really formative to me in how I do things and just like how I feel about what I do. Cause I think that's really important, is like, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like we're making progress, and that, there's a greater purpose to what we're doing here.
Okay. I have so much to like just build off of what you just said there. I'm like, I got goosebumps when you're talking about like, you're a trailblazer, you're beating down the bush to like create a new path so that other women can see you and, not be afraid to take the risk, not be afraid to reach out. It's not even that risky to just reach out, but people still think it's attainable for some reason.
100%.
And also too, I guess you're just built different. You know that you're just built different. But
I like to think that.
As you are sitting here and talking to us in, the store that you co-founded with Abby Albino, and you also own Mack House, of course, you're a businesswoman on top of everything you do at the Toronto Raptors. How did you find your voice and become so strong? You've mentioned your mentors and your bosses, but it still takes a level of willpower to do that yourself.
This is going to sound so crazy, but like fake it till you make it. Like, it's so crazy, but like, And I think people sometimes get upset when you say stuff like that, but like, you got to fake some confidence. Like, there was many, many times in my career. I am a very confident person now. I was not my whole life. Like, to be frank, like, I was always like a happy, friendly, had a lot of people in my life that supported me, but I was not super confident. I've struggled with mental health, frankly, my whole life, like anxiety and panic attacks, and like really affected me early in my career before I really had an opportunity to like dig into like why those things were happening to me and like why I was feeling a certain way. But man, put on a brave face and fake it till you make it. Like, I've faked confidence so many times, and it's not disingenuous, but there's a level of, you know, there's just a level of putting yourselves in position to flourish that requires you to fake it. Like, I don't know how else to say it. And that doesn't mean I wasn't good at my job. It doesn't mean I wasn't a hard worker, but there are times when you feel like you're in over your head, and never letting anybody see you sweat is like, has now become almost like a challenge to me. Like, before it was like really scary. And I was like, okay, well, you're not like, you think you got me on this one? You don't got me. I'm fine. And then then you like go in your car, you're like, oh my God, like, how am I going to do this? Like, but honestly, there was just so many times where I didn't feel good about myself. There's so many times that I didn't feel welcome. There's so many times that I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I doing this? Like, this is just can't be worth it. And you just like put your chin up and you keep going every day, and you find solace in places that you feel good, and you take the weight and you distribute it to amongst the people you love, and then you wipe the tears and head back out into the world, and you live a new day. So that's always been my philosophy, to be honest. I would say in the last couple of years, I have real confidence, and I had real confidence before, but it was just like, I was younger. It wavered, like it wavers all the time in your life. And I think you just have to just like keep getting back on the horse and keep, waking up every day and say, today is a new day. It's going to be better. And some days it's better and some days it's just worse.
I would say, I'm listening to you, and I think you're right in some senses. And I'd say it's not fake confidence. I think if you went to anybody, I would strongly suggest that Messiah on his first day somewhere in his first job felt the same way you felt. And
I'm sure.
I think it's very natural to feel that way. And I think, yeah, for sure. Listen, we don't know everything all the time. So that's part of the learning process, I would suggest. And so the confidence is there, it just grows, right? Because I would suggest it takes confidence to even take that step. Man, you left Halifax with a month's rent guaranteed, right? To figure it out. That takes a lot of confidence. So
yeah. And honestly, you build confidence through experience.
Yep.
I have figured it out enough times to know that I'm going to figure it out. And
Sure.
That's where it's there's, like you said, no matter who you are, whether you're the prime minister of this country, you're the general manager of an NBA team, you're going to have doubt. You're going to have things that you don't know what you're doing. Like, that's just a product of life. Like, you're
Sure.
going to put in situations like you became a parent. The first time you became a parent, you didn't know what you were doing. Like, you read books and you tried your best, but you start to gain confidence, not necessarily in your skills, not necessarily in other people, not necessarily in like what's around you, but you gain confidence in your ability to figure it out. And
Right.
that general confidence for me has really pushed me forward, because like, I don't know how I'm going to always figure it out, but I always seem to figure it out. Same as the rent thing. Like, I don't know how I was going to pay that second month's rent, but like, I would figure it out, and so if you do that so many times, you figure it out so many times, you just start to believe that you're going to figure it out. And that confidence in itself has really, for me, been like what's really changed for me or evolved.
This is a motivational speech over here. I'm getting motivated right now. Like, I was all businesses right now. Like, I love it. Shelby.
They're all the businesses.
Shelby, we've been talking about monopoly over here. Okay, so let us know now your relationship with the 905. How did the 905 enter the picture for you?
Yeah. So, man, every time I talk about the 905, like the 905 was like probably two of the most formative years of my career. And I put so much value on I'm going to call it D League, because when I was there, it was the D League. Mm-hmm. not to be that old person who like refuses to like adapt to the change. But when I was there back in my day, it was the D League. And man, I feel so strongly about how much my D League experience and my G League experience pushed my career forward. I was working on the business side at the time. I went back for my second stint working for Dave and working for Tim Lywicki, and was able to kind of like build a relationship when Masai and Bobby and everybody came in. We sat on the same floor, to be frank. And so it started as more of like a social relationship of, you know, I was one of the youngest people on that floor. And then when Masai and Bobby and Teresa and everybody came, I was like, oh, people my age, like people I can talk to. And that's sort of like how the relationship started. And I worked with them on a few different projects, you know, throughout my time when I came back up to work for Dave. And I did not have exposure to like that basketball front office. Like I think the front office basketball operations side is such a more like publicized career choice. Like when I worked at St. FX, like not that I didn't know there were GMs, but it just like wasn't something that was really out there. Like I thought my way to get into sports was work in sports business. Like that's just to me was the only kind of path. I didn't really think about GM, scout, like it just wasn't on my radar of things that I really knew about, to be frank. And so when I started working with them, I kind of had like this, almost like this itch, to be frank, where it was like, man, like I missed the basketball side. I was working on everything at that point, hockey and soccer and live music. And like all of those things are incredible. But like I grew up playing basketball. Basketball's who I am. It's a huge part of my like my identity and the culture that I identify with and where I feel at home. And so I really was like starting to think like I maybe want to do this basketball. Like I think I really want to push all in. And the other thing that for me sort of spurred that thought onwards was I actually missed the like higher stakes. So the business side is incredible and contributes so much. Like we can't do anything that we do without the business side. And they're such an integral part of like our organization and how we present our teams to the world. But I'm competitive. Like I like, you
winning.
know, I want the stakes
like
to be
winning.
high. I like winning and I don't like losing. You know, I don't know what I like more, if I like winning more, if I hate losing more, but I like that sort of high stakes. And I started to kind of get this craving to be like closer to the winning and closer to the like the stakes of the ups and the downs of what a basketball season is like. And that kind of pushed me towards considering like a career in basketball operations. And I'll never forget telling Dave that I wanted to move over to the basketball side because he was very much, you know, bringing me up for the business side. So I think he was a little, you know, disappointed, but also very happy for me. But I think he was a little sad. And, you know, ultimately then Messiah approached me about the 905 job before I have even had an opportunity to approach him. So I was waiting for the season to be over to chat with him and be like, hey, I think I really would like to consider a move. Like, is there any openings? Like, just, I don't know, it was a shot in the dark. And then before the season was over, he actually approached me about the 905 job. So I guess I put it out there and the universe brought it back to me before I even had a chance.
Manifesting energy. That's a
yeah,
crazy
exactly.
feeling though. That's a crazy feeling having Masai Ujiri approach you for that.
Yeah, it was crazy. And he, you know, and it was the G League opportunity was so interesting to me. Like, so I decided to do it, and you know, 905 happened fast. Like I think maybe we did, but like they had the press conference in like end of June to announce the 905, and I was the first 905 hire. I was the only 905 hire at the time, and then John Wiggins came on shortly thereafter, and Jesse Mermis was, you know, slated to be the head coach. But it was literally the three of us. And before John was like fully brought on, I had to go to Summer League in Vegas and meet with the G League. And it was like, I remember it was me, Dan, Bobby, and Teresa, and we sat in that meeting with the G League. And there's just like this big binder of this ops manual. And they're kind of just like, we meet for like a few hours. And then like, I got the binder, and then I was flying home and they were staying for the rest of Summer League. And I was like, they were like, all right, like, let us know what you need. And I was like, oh,
great.
Okay. So then I got home and I'm like,
I'll get right on this
1,000-page
1,000-page document.
So then I'm like, I've never been to Hershey. It was Hershey Center at the time, Paramount Fine Food Center. I'd never been there before. So then I'm like, I guess I should go see what this is. Thank goodness for John Wiggins, because he had worked with the Power and he had, so I met with John. We went to the arena and John was like, okay, this is here. I want to put this locker room. Like, if I did not have John, holy, I would have been like, because we didn't have a locker room, we didn't have a washer and dryer, like we had nothing. And it was like me and John just had to like figure out how to get this team up and running by like, I guess open tryout was on my birthday, September 16th. So like in 2 months or whatever, we were like, all right, I guess we're starting this new team. But when in my life am I ever gonna like be able to help start a team from scratch? Like
Agreed.
what, like
A
that's just like
franchise.
not a franchise like from scratch. So that experience was just so incredibly valuable. Like my 2 years in the G League, like I just can't say enough. Like you get to do everything. Like you literally, what has like 5-6 people at the NBA level, it's just me or just John or just Jesse at the time or just Dan Toltzman. Like it's just like was the coolest experience. And every time someone's like, should I consider going to the G League? I'm like, do it. Like do it. It was so formative to my career. It was just like such an unbelievable experience. Not without the struggles like anything, but just unbelievably positive for what it did for me.
I'll second that. Having spent time there, it's an unbelievable place to grow and learn and, you know, get your hands dirty, right?
100%.
How do you take that experience? I want to just flip back to your business, give your business a little press here, because how do you take that experience and flip it back to building what you are sitting in now?
You know, I've always been interested in business. So I left the business stuff behind a little bit, but it's always something that I've been passionate about. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. My dad had his own business. Like, so when I moved to the basketball side, I still felt like there was like a little bit missing in my life, not in my career, but in my life. And, you know, I've said it before, I like winning, I like losing, I like risks. So, you know, I felt like there was sort of this business creative part of me that maybe wasn't getting fulfilled in the way that I wanted it to. And Mack House was born out of a hobby of me painting sneakers to help myself with my mental health and my anxiety. It was like a way for me to like turn the TV off, turn the brain off, and really just like focus on doing something. I'm not much of a meditation person, not because I don't believe in meditation, but I've tried it. I don't know if I'm built for it. I really admire people who can sit there and meditate, but like 2 minutes of meditating for me feels like a lifetime. And like, I had to find a more active way to meditate, if that makes sense. And sneaker customization and painting sneakers was that. And, you know, the more I did it, the more I was like, this is really cool. Like this could be a really cool business thing. And there's one thing to know about me. It's like, if I have an idea or if I have something in my head, I'm either doing it or I'm never doing it. Like I either have to do it right away or I just need to like let it go and put it in the past, because I am yeah,
Obsessive?
yep.
Like I'm like that too. Obsessive compulsive. I got the idea. It's happening.
Word.
Yeah.
It's either going or
Yeah,
dead, like
that's right.
one or the other. There's no in between. And so I had it in my head and it was kind of like percolating for a couple weeks, and I went to All-Star. I went to All-Star where was All-Star that year? New Orleans. And there was like a sneaker customization activation. I was like, oh yeah, this is done. Like I'm doing this. So I came home and, you know, decided to start Mack House, and Mack House was born. And then Make Way was born soon thereafter, from the exact reason of like, I got an idea in my head, I couldn't shake it. And I was like, I just need to do this or I'm never going to be able to do it. But all of that being said, the businesses for me are a really sort of different and cool way to frankly buck the system. We live in the NBA and I think like we're trying to like push progress forward and change, like make all this change. And but you do it in a really sort of like micro way, if that makes sense. Like owning something yourself and being able to like make all the decisions and like really build it the way you want to build it is something to me that has a different type of impact, both on my life and other people's lives. And that's been a huge part of like what's fulfilled me with this. And like, I think there's sort of this really incredible culture in the Raptors that recognizes people for everything that they are, as opposed to who they are in the NBA. And that's been, I've had the door opened for me. Like Masai is so much more than just an NBA president. You know, there's our players, like look at all of our players, incredible like business and community adventures. And part of my job is to encourage them to pursue those opportunities. So who am I to sit there and tell them to go pursue life outside of basketball and, building your life up outside of basketball. And then I have these ideas that I just don't put into fruition just because I work in the NBA. And so I like the idea of doing things that people say you can't do. And I think people think you can't own businesses and work in the NBA, but I'm here to tell you that you can.
I love that. It's like, I ain't no hypocrite. I'll put this down.
Right. But it's crazy, right? Like I tell these guys all the time, like I try to support them in what they're doing. And then I have an idea and I'm just going to like not execute the idea because I work in basketball. It's like, that's just not, it's not true to what I'm preaching, really.
Well, that makes sense. And the fact that like, so, when I was at Midway filming there for a feature, give you guys a little spotlight. Abby Albino, she told me the story about how you guys came up with the name, everything created for women, by women, the only standalone sneaker and streetwear boutique. I had to memorize this, girl.
Yo, I was gonna say, you're like, I would not have like that rolled off the tongue for you. I don't even think I would have done that.
I've only said it a million times. But yeah, in Canada, which is pretty impressive to itself because it's completely original. But when we go back to Mack House for a second, where did the name Mack House even come from?
This is so crazy. So Mack House. Okay. So when I was trying to come up with a name, I really wanted the name to have some significance to what I wanted it to feel like. And a huge part of my upbringing was being out East, that sort of East Coast hospitality, like that really sort of authentic way that people bring you in and like you could not know someone and walk into their house and like feel at home. And that was really like what I wanted Mack House to be. Sneakers in Toronto in general has a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of barriers. I would say a lot of this sort of too cool for school mentality, like I'm too cool to care about you, anybody else, anything. And I didn't want this to be another iteration of that type of sneaker culture. Because there is a lot of amazing people in sneaker culture, but sort of as a whole, it has this sort of too cool for school mentality. And so I wanted Mack House to really like emulate how I grew up. And one of the things that I used to do at the house that my dad still lives at, we used to fish mackerel off of the dock. And as I was trying to come up with names, nothing was like sticking to me. And like, there just was I'm not even going to tell you some of the other words and names that came out of it because they were terrible. But I thought about like a really sort of, that was like a very uniquely personal experience for me and something that I have like very fond memories of. And like house and home to me is a word that means a lot. And I think something special about the East Coast is how much people open up their homes to people. It's not just about being friendly. Like we invite people into our homes, whether like we know them or not. And when I moved to Toronto, I realized that's not really like a thing here. Like I would invite people over that I barely knew. I'm like, oh, you can come to my house before we go. And they'd be like, oh, no, I'll just meet you there. And I was like, oh, these people not
They're like, we've seen that horror movie. No thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
I think people thought I was like super weird. Whereas like in Halifax, you invite everybody to your house, like doors unlocked, pop in, whatever you want. So that the word house and home was really important to what I wanted Mack House to be. And then Mack came from fishing.
I love that. I love that. And also, by the way, one of these days, I'm going to come stunting on you because I actually too love sneaker art as well. So
yo, you have to come. I'd love to have you in once we're open.
Through. Absolutely.
I would love that.
So people can go there and design shoes. I haven't been there. So just give us a 10-second, like, what is it?
Yeah. So basically people book an appointment online, you book your session, you bring your own sneakers, come in, and you're there for 2 hours and we walk you through the entire process of customizing your own sneaker. And so whatever your idea is that you come in with, we'll help you bring it to life. And so it's a very, like every person's sneaker is different. It's not like a prescribed, this is what you have to do or not do. It's really about your ideas. And then we'll teach you how to do it. And then we have all the supplies and tools and everything in there to help you bring it to life. It's super fun.
I had the absolute pleasure of seeing you guys just in your element, really, because I was producing a feature on the Losh, the kids that came from Saskatchewan.
Oh yeah,
Indigenous. Yeah,
that was the best.
Of course, and shout out to National Indigenous History Month, by the way.
Yep.
And like it's an incredible experience, and it was just exactly what you described. It's very warm, it's very welcoming. But not to take too much of a turn, but I'm going to take a turn here. I don't care.
Turn it.
So now you went for the 905. Okay. and now you're back with the Toronto Raptors.
Mm-hmm.
You're a director. How did that jump happen?
You know, gosh, I don't even know. I have to like really I have to ask some people, but I spent 2 years in the G League. We won the championship in my second year when Stack was the coach. And in that season, I had put a lot of time and my own time and resources into player development. Back then in the G League, player development was not something that G League teams had. It's not something you did. It was very much a thing at the NBA level, but it was not a thing at the G League level. And I was just really interested in it. I love people. I coached when I was in Toronto. I was coaching in inner city programs and working with kids and sort of building like holistic support programs around kids who played basketball. It was less about basketball, more about like life and helping them reach their goals and, get to the next level of whatever they wanted to achieve in life. So that was like a real passion thing for me, working with the kids that I worked with, and shout out to all of them because they are still very much a huge part of my life and a huge part of why I stayed in Toronto, because I had like, they took me into their families and that was like so incredible. But I was like, there's no reason why I can't do this at this level. And so I started just like putting in programs. We did an internship day. I started having the guys like meet with different people and we did different programming. And we started to build like a real structure around PD. And I think ultimately the Raptors were looking to add some support to the team, who was just Courtney Charles at the time, who you guys are very familiar with. And that's what I was kind of doing that at the G League level on my own accord. And so I was asked to come up and fill in the player development side. And then I just sort of grew it from there. So I think that's how it happened, if I remember correctly.
So you've had so much experience, let's say, right? Because you built it, like, as you said, from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your most proud achievements in terms of maybe not players or maybe not, you know what I mean? Like what are some of those moments that you're like, the hard work was worth it, or, building this was definitely worth it. That's why I built this, or that's why we built this.
I think, the championship obviously was one of them, both of them, like
beyond that. Yeah.
The 905, the 905 one for me was like, I don't think many people cared when 905 won a championship. I say that nicely, but it wasn't like when the Raptors won a championship.
Of course.
But the 905 championship for me was so like almost emotional because we put so much into that thing. And there was such a small group. It was such a small group of people. So it really felt like super intimate and just super like you were in the trenches with those people. And so that for me was super significant. Honestly, I'll just be frank, like my proudest moments, and for me, this is very much akin to my personality, is like seeing other people flourish. Like I'm really proud of like Mike Kaiser, who was one of our first G League players. He came to Raptors training camp. Like he's a father now. His daughter turns 4 today. Happy birthday, Mia. Like him still calling me and us like having conversations about his life and, seeing like Fred build a company and be a father. Like those aren't necessarily moments that I'm proud of because I take credit for them, but it's just unbelievable watching people grow and watching people just become like everything that you knew that they would be. And again, this isn't me taking credit for those things, but it's unbelievable to see them do it. And that still brings me joy every single day. And those are some of the things that I'm most proud of. And I'm proud of like my relationships and my friendships that I've built over the years. Like so many of those people that I've worked with, I still get to talk to. Like I'm proud of Ashton Smith for getting the player development job in the CEBL. Like he was one of our first 905 guys and he's also a father now. Like those things are what I'm most proud of. And those are the moments that I think I can look back on and be like, what we do actually matters. And I was joking with Ashton the other day because I have a picture of him when we made him coach 905 camp in the summer, and he has like his shirt tucked in, he's got the whistle around the neck, he's got the hat on, like he looks like a real like dad coaching the mini basketball team. And I sent it to him and I was like, I knew that you are going to be a dad and a coach from day one because I knew this picture would pay off someday.
So good.
I love it. Well, the 905 has been your baby, really. Like you had to get that thing up from scratch as the first employee. So of course it's going to be very emotional and you're going to have all these attachments to like, especially the first group of guys that came through. But
and our staff, just to be clear, like
well,
John Wiggins doing what he's doing now, like Nate Mitchell, like there's just so many unbelievable people that are like off flourishing out of what was that experience. And I think that's like super cool.
Absolutely. And it has kind of like a butterfly effect because, like, you know, look at where the 905 is now. Look at how much, you know, NBA superstars we've developed with the 905, being a Pascal Siakam, Norm, Fred, everybody who's come through. And then now Alex Johnson, as of recently, who's now doing his thing with Brooklyn. But
killing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was happy to see him flourish from a 905 program. But you know, I want to get to your position now where you're currently at. I'm just curious. I want to just ask this out of the dark, but what's the most unexpected thing about your job now that people would never guess you have to do?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, in a pandemic year, there's like a lot of those things that I think none of us expected. I would say like, I don't know. I don't want to make this a pandemic answer, but like, I never expected to be in a Disney bubble. I never expected that I would like at some point be like, I lived in Florida for 6 months during a global pandemic. Like there's been a lot about the last little while that I would never expect. I think maybe the best way that I can answer this is, I think what maybe people don't expect or don't understand and is how complex NBA players are in a good way and how much they do. And I think there's, you know, when we talk about player development and we talk about development as people, I think a lot sort of gets talked about with our jobs. Oh, what you do for the players is so great. And it's like, oh, hold on a second. Like, I see it as the opposite, which is like, we have these like incredibly complex athletes and humans, and they dictate to us what they want to see and where they want to go in their life. And then we're here to support and resource accordingly. This isn't like me saving the day for all NBA players that come across my team. Like, this is driven by the players. It's driven by their interests, their ambitions, the things that they care about. And then we are here to support because they're incredibly busy human beings, but we're not doing the work. Like, they do the work, they carve out their path, and we're just here to, you know, facilitate what they want to bring to life. And I think people don't always understand that. I think they think it's like, you know, Nike and NBA is these big marketing machines that just sort of pushes these guys in these directions. And they are like incredibly intelligent businessmen, community leaders. Like, they are just so incredible. And I think people don't give them enough credit for who they are not on the basketball court. And we are not here to save anybody. And frankly, we can't. Like, they dictate to us where they want to see things, and we are here to support. But there's certainly, you know, those guys are going to get there on their own, to be frank. Like, and I say this all the time about people like Fred, like Norman. These guys were built for this. Whether I was in their life or not, or 905 or Raptors were in their life or not, they were going to figure it out. And I say that with all the respect for our organization, but we are here as resources. We are here to support. We are here to help them reach their potential. But if anybody thinks that Fred wasn't going to figure this out one way or another, you're sadly mistaken.
So in terms of figuring it out, how do you plan out your next steps? Like, where's Shelby in 5 years? What does Shelby want for herself in 5 years? What does that look like? Obviously, business mogul, empire, you know, all that stuff. But as far as the NBA goes, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think for me, like, I just want to keep growing and keep expanding my skills. Like, I think, you know, PD has been so incredible to me, but there's a lot of other things about the NBA that I really want to learn more about. So for me, it's about stepping into opportunities where I can, maybe I'm not super comfortable or I'm not as established from a skill set standpoint, but where I can grow. And so that's really, really important for me. You know, I got practice now. Exactly. That's true, right? Like, you know, whether it be like pushing more in on sort of like learning about scouting and the CBA and things like that. Like those are areas that there are a lot more people who are really well established in those spaces, but I want to grow and I want to learn and I like a challenge. And so for me, it's just about focusing on the next 5 years is about focusing on like, how can I continue to grow and put myself in positions where I can like continue to grow as like, not just a NBA person, but as like a human. And I think that's like really important for me.
That's amazing. And I know you have to, because you're a boss, you have some meetings to get to, so we won't hold you for too much longer. Do you have any final words, some parting words? You've had a lot of great things to share. Motivational speeches, really. But anything else? Anything else I can get from you?
Let me see. I would say my two parting pieces of advice. The first one would be, don't be scared to take big risks. That's been really incredible for me in my career. And the second one is let it go, because I know and can think of so many times where I thought the world was crumbling down around me and all of the stress and anxiety. I remember being so upset about different things, and I cannot remember what those things were actually about, but I definitely remember the stress, the panic, the anxiety, the tears, the everything. And so I would just encourage anyone, especially women, people who maybe don't always feel like they have the same opportunities as others, to just let it go, let it roll off your shoulders and keep it pushing.
I love that. I love that.
Shelby Weaver, thank you for your time.
I appreciate you guys. It's always lovely to talk to both of you. And I thank you both for all you guys are doing, because you guys are just incredible role models in your own right. So I'm appreciative for both of you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.